Redditor 1. I've never forgotten that night, though I was only 6. The condo balcony overlooked the Gulf, the sky still bright with sunset when Mom tucked me into the white plastic chair and my great-grandmother settled into hers. The clock inside chimed 8:47 p.m., and I promised I wouldn't interrupt their card game if they'd let me stay up just 5 more minutes. Great-grandma smiled, ruffled my hair, and told me the stars would come out soon. The warm salt breeze carried the laughter from the living room through the sliding door, and I watched shrimp boat lights wink across the dark water far below. The cushions were smothered in rockets and planets, reminders of my space obsession. So I leaned back, pressing my forehead against the cool glass, imagining distant worlds. Then the sky cracked. It wasn't thunder, no rolling roar, no jagged flash of lightning, just a single deafening boom that split the night. Great-grandma gasped, her knuckles white on my shoulder. We looked up, expecting clouds to glow or rain to fall, but the air stayed still. Up above the horizon, 5 lights dropped like falling stars that refused to land. At first, they hung motionless, brilliant pinpricks against the dark. Then they began to dance. They rolled on invisible tracks, spinning tight spirals and sudden 90-degree pivots that no airplane or helicopter could manage. Each light left a ribbon of gold-white afterglow, an impossibly perfect arc frozen for a heartbeat before it faded to nothing. I felt my heart flip-flop in my chest, my breath caught in my throat. Great-grandma leaned forward, whispering, "My stars." But her voice trembled into silence. The lights pulsed with colors I couldn't name. One shone like melted silver flecked with purple, another glowed like a diamond dipped in orange juice. They shimmered and undulated as though alive, threads of color weaving through one another. I blinked, certain I was dreaming, until the lights darted beneath the clouds, only to reappear higher still, beckoning me to follow. A crowd had gathered on the beach below. I could hear distant gasps and see silhouettes leaning over the railing beside me. But all those voices drifted away in the hush that fell when the lights began their finale. 3 of them knotted into a triangle, locking into formation before tracing a jagged arrow straight upward. They vanished behind the low clouds as quickly as they had come, leaving a hush so complete I could hear my own heartbeat loud enough to drown out the wave. Great-grandma placed a hand on my trembling arm. "Do you see it?" she whispered. I nodded, tears prickling my eyes. She squeezed my shoulder and turned to me, her eyes bright with wonder and something else I couldn't name. Then she tucked me back inside, kissed my forehead, and, in her soft voice, told me it was time for bed. I crawled beneath the sheets, head spinning with questions I didn't dare speak. What magical ballet had we just witnessed? Why did the lights feel alive, as if they were painting secret messages in the sky? As sleep pulled me under, I tasted salt on my lips, and wondered if I would ever be brave enough to ask. Decades passed, and the memory never faded. In college, I studied astronomy, hoping logic could explain the impossible. But every constellation I mapped, every theorem I learned, only deepened the mystery. Last summer, I took my own daughter to that same balcony, now chipped and weathered by time. I told her the shrimp boat lights, the whisper of waves, but not the part about the crack that split the sky, or the lights that danced like ghosts. I wanted her to believe in magic before she learned to question it. That night, I sat in the old plastic chair, her hand in mine, watching for shooting stars. The horizon shimmered with humidity and memory. At 8:47 p.m. precisely, the air seemed to hold its breath. I blinked, and there it was. One light, suspended low, pulsing gold white. My heart thundered as I felt 6-year-old me press her nose to the glass, breath fogging the pain. My daughter's eyes widened beside me as I raised a trembling finger. The light spun in place with a whisper of motion, then shot upward in a slanted arc, dissolving into the clouds. I closed my eyes, tasting copper and salt. When I opened them again, my daughter gripped my hand with a solemn nod and whispered, "Did you see that, Mama?" I swallowed hard and closed my mouth, just as my great-grandmother did 40 years ago. Some mysteries aren't for explaining, only for sharing in silent awe. As the condo lights flickered behind us and the waves drummed their ancient rhythm below, I realized that magic isn't something we outgrow. It's something we carry, like a secret constellation in our hearts, waiting for a summer night to leap back into view. Redditor 2. I've never told anyone this before, but that night in Shadow Valley still hides in the back of my mind, flickering like the beam of our lone flashlight. It was past 10 when Dave pulled off the winding dirt track, the dashboard clock glowing 10:17 p.m. The three of us, me, Dave, and Marcus, had downed half a six-pack under a street lamp and decided we needed more excitement than my backyard could offer. Shadow Valley Cave, they said. Totally safe, totally lit, totally next level. We followed the narrow path, laughing at Dave's lame alien impressions and Marcus's uneasy glances into the dark. The beam from our single flashlight cut a tunnel of visibility through the overgrowth, highlighting brambles and low-hanging vines that snagged at our jeans. Every time Dave disappeared into the shadows for a prank, Marcus jumped as though the forest itself might leap out and snatch him. My own nerves buzzed with cheap beer and the kind of giddy bravado you only get when you're too young to know better. At 10:30 p.m. I checked my phone for the time. No signal, of course, but the screen lit up just enough to show me we'd been laughing our way along for 15 minutes. The tunnel, really just a canopy of branches, bloomed ahead, its entrance pitch black. Dave crawled through first, hands scraping the ground, the flashlight beam bouncing wildly behind him. Marcus hesitated at the threshold, muttering horror movie cliches about abandoned mines and vengeful spirits. I followed, crouching low, aware that every rustle might be a spider or something worse. Halfway through, everything snapped into focus. Dave skidded to a halt. The beam of the flashlight tumbled from his grip and vanished into the undergrowth. His breath caught in his throat. "Guys," he whispered, voice raw with panic. We burst into the clearing, stumbling over exposed roots. I heard Marcus gulp. Then I looked up. 3 lights hovered in the black sky, perfect circles of white-yellow glow, arranged in a flawless triangle. No sound, no buzz of engines, just 3 silent guardians suspended over the valley. They pulsed gently, as if breathing. The air felt different, denser, charged with static. My heart pounded so hard I thought they'd see it thumping through my shirt. "Run," Marcus breathed, but none of us moved. I'd heard why people in horror movies stand frozen when facing the impossible. It's fear and awe tangled so tightly your body forgets how to obey. The lights cast weird shadows on the ground, making tree trunks look like grotesque silhouettes. Every gust of wind sounded like a whisper, as though the forest itself held its breath. Time warped. We might have stood there 30 seconds or 30 minutes. I've never been sure. At exactly 10:37 p.m., the lights shifted. 1 drifted sideways, 2 tilted, then all 3 angled downward, as if pointing toward something. My breath fogged in the cold night air, taste metallic on my tongue. I swallowed hard, the forest alive with silent expectation. It was Dave who blinked first. He lurched forward, curiosity ripping through his fear. Marcus and I followed, drawn toward the lights by some invisible tether. Each step felt wrong, like we were trespassing into another world. That's when I saw it, arched across the valley at eye height, 50 feet above the dark water. A concrete bridge with 3 street lamps spaced exactly the width of those floating orbs. In that surreal moment, relief crashed through me. The lights hadn't been alien. They'd been those lamps, backlit by an odd trick of perspective and distance. We'd been standing in the deepest part of the gorge, our eyes miles below the bridge's level, fooled by darkness into mistaking the mundane for the impossible. I blinked and the forest hurried back to normal. The lamps stood on their metal poles, mundane as anything. No static charge filled the air, no shadows writhed. I laughed then, a raw, high-pitched sound that echoed off the trees. "We're idiots," I said, my voice shaking. Dave and Marcus exploded into laughter too. Hysterical, relieved laughs as we realized our terror had been self-inflicted. We drove home in silence, the beer buzz fading into a strange, sober clarity. The clock read 11:02 p.m. No time had passed, and yet the world felt forever altered by those few minutes of wonder and terror. Years later, whenever we get together, always more than a few drinks in, someone reminds us of that night. We laugh about the alien lights, about Marcus nearly soiling himself, about how drunk we must have been to miss the bridge entirely. But there's always that pause when the laughter dies down, when our eyes meet in that half-knowing way, and I remember how easy it was to believe the unbelievable. I sometimes drive out to that trail alone, flashlight in hand. The bridge still arches over the valley, lamps still glow on summer nights. I park my car at the mouth of that tunnel, switch off the engine, and let the world grow dark. Shadows creep back into the undergrowth, and the forest whispers around me. At 10:37 p.m., if I'm lucky, I catch a glimpse of something suspended above the trees. 3 glowing orbs pulsing without sound. By the time I blink, they're gone, and I'm left staring at the street lamps, still standing at their posts, no aliens in sight. I lean against the railing, heart still racing, and remind myself, sometimes the real terror isn't in the unknown, but in how easily we can twist the familiar into something extraordinary. And maybe that's the greatest trick of all, that in the dead of night, under a cloak of darkness and fear, 3 street lamps can become a cosmic ballet that makes you believe you're not alone in the universe. Redditor 3. I woke to a presence at exactly 2:17 IEM. My alarm clock lay dead on the bedside table, its LED display blank, but I knew the hour because the world outside had fallen into that heavy, watchful silence you only get in the middle of summer nights. I'd fallen asleep on the mattress in what used to be Dad's garage, now my bedroom. Windows on 3 walls glow in the dark stars plastered across the ceiling like constellations I could almost touch. When I opened my eyes, the room was bathed in a hue that made my blood drum in my ears. An impossible, liquid green that flowed across the rugs and model airplanes strewn on the floor. I blinked twice, expecting the color to vanish, but it only deepened. Soft, almost welcoming, yet strange enough to make my heart flip. I sat up, comforter pooling around my ankles, limbs stiff from sleep. The curtains, white and worn, glowed like stained glass, shifting in gentle ripples. My first thought, the streetlight had come on outside, casting its lamplight through my windows. But I'd seen every lamp in this neighborhood, and none burned in green. A musical hum began beneath my feet, a vibration that tickled my bones rather than my ears. I pressed my palm to the mattress, feeling the resonance roll through me like thunder riding a wave. My heart pounded as the hum coalesced into a single, pure note that seemed to speak directly to some hidden chamber in my mind. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and crept to the window overlooking Mrs. Peterson's yard. The grass was still, shimmering with dew that reflected the green glow. Above the old maple tree hovered something I'd only ever seen in films. A disc, perfectly round, its surface alive with undulating patterns that pulsed in time with the low vibration. It was enormous, so big that it blocked out half the sky through my 3 windows. The rim of the craft was lined with ovoid ports that glowed in shifting bands of chartreuse and lime, as if the ship itself breathed in light. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass, fogging it with my breath, squinting to make sense of the impossible. My stomach rolled. I'd read about UFOs in library books, but those were words on a page. This was real. This was here. My fingers trembled on the sill, and I wondered if my great-grandmother would have called it a visitation, or if Dad would scream for me to get back in bed. But the silence held us all, me, the ship, the maple tree, and dared me to look deeper. The hum rose, harmonics folding over themselves until the room felt alive, flush with energy. My reflection in the window wavered, and for a moment I thought I saw something behind me, a ghost of my terrified face, eyes wide, mouth half open. When I turned, there was nothing but the pale poster of Darth Vader on my wall, watching in silent judgment. Then the green light contracted, pulsing faster, bright, dim, like a heartbeat growing frantic. The ship slid sideways, its underside revealing a circular hatch. I could have sworn I saw a shape behind the glass of one porthole, something tall and thin, a silhouette that hovered just out of focus. My breath caught so sharply I thought I might suffocate. At that moment, the note I hadn't noticed before scraped against my mind. Don't scream. I hadn't heard the words, but they flared in my consciousness, shaped like a command. My throat tightened as I fought the urge to shout. The craft released a single beam of emerald light that lanced downward, illuminating a patch of lawn so bright it seemed to burn away grass and soil. The beam held for a second, and I felt its warmth on my cheek through the glass. It buzzed with energy, half painful, half thrilling, like the touch of static on a balloon. My heart thundered as wordless images flashed across my mind, stars bending around black holes, oceans in distant galaxies, a map of places no human had ever seen. I stumbled back, pressing my palms against my temples, fighting the swirl of awe and terror. I realized then the ship wasn't just watching, it was offering, inviting me to step beyond the thin boundary of my garage-turned-bedroom into some realm where the universe unfolded like a hidden flower. And then it vanished. One moment the sky held that living disk, the next, the night was empty, save for Mrs. Peterson's maple and the whisper of wind through its branches. The green glow faded to black, the hum snapped off like a switch, and the silence rushed back in a tidal wave. I stood in the darkness, heart hammering, until my legs gave out and I crumpled to the floor. The room felt impossibly normal, the soft hum of air through vents, the faint chirp of a clock radio coming to life in the living room. I crawled back to bed, curling around my teddy bear, shivering in the sudden chill. Morning arrived too soon. Pale sunlight crept through the windows as my alarm blinked 7:16 IEM, though I'd lost track of time during the green night. I tiptoed downstairs, hoping for whispers, for gasps, for any sign that someone else had witnessed the impossible. But Mom and Dad chattered over toast about grocery lists, and my sister complained about a dream she'd had, no mention of rim-lit ships hovering over maple trees. After breakfast, I raced outside, scanning neighbor leaves for scorch marks or strange imprints, anything to prove the night hadn't been a dream. The lawn was perfect, unbroken except for dew and stray leaves. Mrs. Peterson's tree stood tall, its branches swaying in the breeze. No portholes, no green glow. All summer I searched for answers. I reread my space books, pored over astronomy magazines, begged Mr. Reynolds at the library for any stray UFO reports around Fort Walton Beach. Nothing matched. No local sightings, no flight plans, no storm damage. Just the ordinary world, indifferent to my extraordinary midnight visitation. Now, after 30-plus years, I still feel the pull of that green light whenever I lie awake in the dark. I keep the glow-in-the-dark stars on my kids' ceilings, a silent promise that sometimes the universe reaches down to brush our tiny rooms with wonder. And though no craft has hovered over their maple trees, and no green light has turned their curtains into emerald screens, they sleep beneath those stars, believing in the magic I once saw. Some say it was a dream, a trick of childhood imagination fueled by too many sci-fi cartoons and late-night thunderstorms. Maybe they're right. But when I close my eyes and breathe deeply, I can still feel the hum resonate in my bones, the warmth of a beam that burned questions into my mind. Because even if it was only a dream, it taught me something real, that the universe is far vaster, far stranger than we can ever understand. And on some summer night, somewhere in the dark, it might just come back to visit. Redditor 4. I've never told many people about that summer evening when I was 14. Probably because no one ever really listens. But Melissa was there, and so was Mom. They saw it too, and they remember. Our house perched on the slope above Henderson Bay, where the water spread out like a sheet of dark glass under a fading sunset. That night, Melissa and I were sprawled on the sectional sofa, half watching some syndicated sitcom reruns, while Mom chopped vegetables in the kitchen. The golden hour bled into dusk, and through the bay windows, the first stars pricked the sapphire sky. That's when we noticed the lights. At first, they looked innocent. Strange, purplish-pink glows drifting above the tree line across the water. But they moved with an unnerving precision, sliding sideways and dipping in perfect unison, like glowing marbles on an invisible board. "Cat?" Melissa whispered, her knuckles white on my arm. "What is that?" My throat bobbed with a lump of panic I couldn't swallow. Melissa, the ultimate alien enthusiast, had plastered her walls with grainy UFO photos and alien abduction tales. Her obsession had always made me uneasy, but tonight I shared her terror. Mom emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her mouth formed a silent "what" as she stepped to the window and peered out. "There," I said, voice cracking. "Above the pines." Mom leaned forward, her hair brushing the glass. The lights pulsed closer, their radiance bending the edges of our living room, painting the walls in soft, unnatural hues. They were silent, silent enough to consume every other sound. The rush of cars on Miller Road vanished. The distant bark of Mr. Gonzalez's dog died in its throat. Even the whoosh of a breeze through the oak tree held its breath. The emptiness pressed around us, hollow as a tomb. I could feel my pulse thudding through my chest like a war drum. Our own breaths sounded loud, each inhale and exhale a blatant intrusion. Then the craft appeared. It hovered so low now that I could make out its shape, a colossal rectangle of brushed steel, indistinct under the colored glow, spanning nearly half the length of our front yard. A row of dark, window-like ports lined its side, each one reflecting the bay's pink twilight like dark mirrors. Geometric etchings interlocked in perfect tessellations, rippled across its surface, shifting as though alive. My legs turned to jelly. Mom's fingers trembled on the windowsill. Melissa's eyes were fixed, wide as saucers. We stood frozen, 3 witnesses beneath a machine that shouldn't have existed outside of our wildest nightmares. There was a hum, or rather a vibration that bypassed my ears and echoed in my bones. I pressed my hand to my thigh, expecting to feel the quilted fabric tremble, but my skin lay still. It was the world itself that shivered. Mom fumbled for her phone. I heard her finger tap the screen, dialing 911, her voice trembling as she tried to describe what we were seeing. But the operator's calm assurances were swallowed by the humming crescendo, and I lost Mom's voice somewhere between hello and a gasp that didn't quite leave her lips. Time fractured. Minutes might have passed, or only seconds. I don't know how long we stood beneath that craft's shadow. Above us, its lights pulsed in tight rhythm. Pulse, glow, fade, a heartbeat for a metal leviathan. Then it moved. It didn't ascend or dart away like a jet. Instead, it slid backward with chilling grace, reversing across the sky as though rewinding a film. The hush cracked like ice, then shattered into sound. Sirens in the distance, a dog yelping, the rustle of leaves asserting themselves once more. Mom's phone clattered to the floor. I bent to pick it up, but her eyes never left the window. The craft faded behind the tree line, melting into the gathering night until only a few dying sparks flickered out. In the aftermath, the world rushed back in. The bay's breeze whispered against the glass. Crickets began their familiar chorus, and somewhere a car honked. Mom's knees buckled and she sank onto the couch. Melissa slid down beside her, silent tears shining in the glow of the TV left on mute. I pressed the phone's power button. No signal, no call recorded. The line lay dead. At dinner that night, we ate in silence. The clink of forks on plates felt obscene, as if we were dining moments after apocalypse. Mom's eyes were distant, as though haunted by unseen crowds. Melissa couldn't meet my gaze. We all wore the same unspoken question. What had just watched us? In the weeks that followed, I scoured the local paper for any mention of strange lights over the bay. Nothing. The official weather report noted high humidity and sundown haze. There were no missing aircraft notices, no curious radar logs, no blinking headlines about unidentified craft over Henderson Bay. Just everyday life, moving on without us. I tried to tell friends, but they laughed. Teenage bravado and disbelief. Some called it drone lights or a laser show from a boat. Some said it was mass hallucination syndrome, 3 gullible girls on a power outage night. But Melissa and I exchanged secret glances that sustained a bond only shared terror can forge. We knew the truth of what glowed above our heads. Now, 30-plus years later, the bay windows remain. I visit home less often, but whenever I do, I slip into that old living room and glance out at the trees. The night air smells of salt and pine. Crickets sing. The world hums along its familiar course. Sometimes, when the wind is just right and the stars fight through clouds, I swear I see a faint glimmer, purplish pink, pulsing ever so slightly, rising behind the oaks at the edge of the water. A child's gasp of light, telling me that some stories don't end, that some watchers still hover between worlds, waiting for witnesses brave enough to look up and remember that the universe is larger, stranger, and more silent than we ever dreamed.